The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Leaf. That silenced him for a few moments. Then he said, very quietly indeed, "Open the door, my darling." "I can't," said I. "The key is down by the front door, under a plantain leaf." And then I said it again, several times, very gently and slowly, and said it so often that he had to go and see, and he got it, of course, and came in. He stopped short by the door. "What is the matter?" he cried. "For God's sake, what are you doing?" I kept on creeping just the same, but I looked at him over my shoulder. "I've got out at last," said I, "in spite of you and Jane, and I've pulled off most of the paper, so you can't put me back." Now why should that man have fainted? But he did, and right across my path by the wall, so that I had to creep over him every time. End of The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman.